Yes, I'm sitting in one of the last reliable Toyotas. Have you heard about some of the wastegate problems on turbocharged engines that they've come out with, the 2.4s and the 3.4 turbo engines that have had recent replacements? Have you also heard about the separation of the axle shafts and what we're talking about on some of the pickup trucks, resulting in a dangerous driving scenario? How about fuel leaks? How about shorting out batteries and shorting out DC converters for some of the hybrid vehicles? The list goes on, and sadly, this isn't a knock about Toyota, because if we have faith in one brand out there, Toyota is the brand that will get it right. They will fix these problems in short order. But could this be a precursor to what's coming? Technology that's far too advanced and more performance, smaller displacement engines, turbocharging, hybrid drivetrains. I mean, the list goes on are all contributing factors, as well as whole new full-scale changeouts to the overall structure and design of some of the late model vehicles, means that there's a possible risk of getting a vehicle that has some big problems. Have you even heard some of the 3.4 liter turbo V6s now that they're putting in the Tundras that they've replaced with the outgoing, infamously reliable 5.7 liter naturally aspirated V8? That thing was a workhorse. The new 3.4s are great performers, great fuel economy, but there's even been some cases, a small number already, that we're talking about some rod bearing failures. Yeah, people have complained that they're starting to see some big troubles. But why is this one of the last reliable vehicles? I mean, right here we have an old school. We do have a big display here. Pretty straightforward. I mean, it is modern day technology, but it's still of older generation. Down here is another great piece. Now we have a good old-fashioned torque converter transmission right here, and that's what is one of the great details on a lot of these vehicles. Of course, a lot of modern day vehicles, Toyotas included, are starting to go with a lot of CVTs. That's the continuously variable transmission. And even though Toyota does it better than anyone, it's still not as reliable as some of the torque converter transmissions like we're finding in these vehicles, where you actually have dedicated gears. Sure, manual gearbox is even better, but we waved goodbye to that with the Dodo Bird many years ago. The next best thing is a torque converter transmission, which is what we're seeing right there. So the long and short of it is, how is this one such a great specimen of a Toyota, and why is this one so much more reliable than some of the late model vehicles? Well, let's take this from the top and talk about some of the late model recalls and problems that Toyota's unfortunately been plagued with. Yes, in fact, with these seats, there's what they call an OCS, an occupant classification system, and there's essentially a sensor that tells you what's going on if you actually have somebody in the seat. Well, if that's not working properly, you can actually expect these airbags to actually not function properly, and that is clearly going to be an issue. And Toyota is saying there's about 999,000 of those units potentially impacted from the 2020 to 21 Toyota Avalon, as well as the Avalon Hybrid and the Corollas, the Highlander Hybrids, RAV4, the RAV4 Hybrid, the Sienna Hybrid, as well as a bunch of different Lexus RX models, and as well as Camry and Camry Hybrids are all potentially impacted by this particular recall. And it means that Toyota will change that potentially short-circuiting sensor out free of charge. But the reality is, if that sensor is not functioning properly, that could mean simply that the passenger is not protected in the event of an accident. And there's also trucks, the Toyota Tacoma 2021-22 model years, that can have the axle shaft behind here actually separate. If it does, because of dirt and debris that gets behind the axle assembly in back there, it could actually result in the separation, causing strange operating conditions and poor drivability, as well as everything coming apart at the seams and potentially causing a crash. And under here, we actually have a sensor. What is that for? That's actually for your backup camera. That's right. What we get right here, you can get a panoramic backup camera view. As soon as you put your vehicle into reverse, this should pop up. But there's an actual recall for about 18,000 and change vehicles in the Lexus lineup, which we all know Lexus is a brand of Toyota, and a lot of these vehicles are having this problem. There's actually regulations that state as soon as you put that vehicle in reverse, that camera has to come alive. And Toyota is actually saying that this isn't actually happening. It's recalled, it has to get reprogrammed, there's an ECU, a change, and some software updates to actually make that proper, because currently there are some vehicles that don't necessarily work as they possibly should. The next recall that Toyota is actually witnessing is 2022 to 2024 Toyota Sequoias, the Tundras, as well as the Lexus LX, and it has to do with the transmission. Yes, when you put the vehicle in neutral, there's a possibility that that vehicle can start rolling backwards. If that vehicle in fact starts to roll inadvertently without the foot on the brake, then that means there's a lacking of the proper amount of interlock. That just means that Toyota has to get their hands on the vehicle, do a TCU upgrade, and Bob's your uncle, and you should be good to go. But it's another little detail that was missed. And so there's another one. A 2021 to 2022, we're talking about the Lexus 450H Plus. That's right, that's the PHEV, the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, as well as, of course, the RAV4 Prime, or what we would expect also the plug-in hybrid, which is essentially the same vehicle. They're great, wonderful, high-performing vehicles with great range, and they're definitely meets the target for a lot of people. And of course, the daily drivability, and of course, all the practicality and the fuel economy savings and all of that goodness. Unfortunately, there's a DC to DC converter internal short, and they say if your vehicle potentially could experience the temperatures below 41 degrees Fahrenheit, you better get your vehicle into the dealership. They have to replace it because there could be an internal short or a fault on that system. And in fact, there could be as many as 43,442 units that may be impacted by this particular issue. I personally was actually looking at the new Lexus 450H Plus. I think it's great. You get great range. You get an extra 50, 60 miles or kilometers out of the range of just pure electric. And as well, of course, it doubles down as a hybrid vehicle. So they're great vehicles. They're very popular. But if you have one of those, definitely be sure to check into that recall. Another issue, 12,000 units of the Toyota Corolla Cross vehicle, obviously the upscale or larger version of what we know and love as the ultra-reliable Corolla, has an issue with, of course, the passenger side airbag possibly not operating properly because of the instrument cluster that impedes the access of that, and there may not be adequate perforations for that airbag to operate properly to protect the passenger in an inadvertent collision. So it's yet another little detail. If you've got one of those vehicles, you got to check it out. And another issue is the Highlander, of course, the Highlander as well as the hybrid Highlander. And if you actually get in a collision, this front lower section could pop off, winding up underneath the wheels of a vehicle and potentially causing a collision. And that does potentially impact a whole pile, 750,000 to be precise and change. And on top of it, we're talking about 2020 to 2023 model years of the Toyota Highlander, hybrid, as well as regular unit. And then about 168,000 2022 to 2023 model year of the Toyota Tundra could actually have an issue with the rear brake lines. They're actually stainless. They could actually impede or make contact with a plastic fuel line tube that could cause perforation and or potential fuel leak. If it has a fuel leak, there could be a risk of fire. Manufacturers, unfortunately, are sometimes missing out on some of these minor little details. And then we have another 2013 to 2018. Here we have the battery on the Toyota RAV4. Yeah, and this, unfortunately, with that particular model, there is a retaining bracket that goes across the battery. But if you put the wrong style of battery in, a lot of customers are doing that, putting slightly smaller battery in there. The battery moves around a little bit, and if it does, it could make contact with that positive post, causing an inadvertent short, fire, or anything in between. Here we're going to do a quick walk around because, in fact, this is one of the last and the simplest vehicles that Toyota makes. We're looking at the Toyota Camry here. It also has front-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive because this is a SE all-wheel drive, but on standard it comes just with a simple little front-wheel drive. Now, you can get a few different drivetrains, but this older generation, this is essentially a 2022 Toyota Camry, but it comes with one of the most tried and true engines. Yes, this is a 2.5 liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder engine, so basic, so tried, so true that Lexus and Toyota continues using that engine, but they're coupling it up now with some of the hybrid drivetrains just to give it a little more oomph. But it's such a staple in their reliability calendar that they continue using this vehicle. So why not continue using it in a regular car like this? I don't see any reason why not. So that's why, in fact, you either get the regular 2.5 liter 4-cylinder like this, no turbos, no extra heat, because that's right, the 2.4 liter turbo 4 that now replaces some modern day Toyotas are now plagued with some drivability concerns, people talking about some surging. Although we haven't heard a whole lot about reliability issues yet on that latest 2.4, the 3.4 liter twin turbo V6, now that they're swapping out in the Toyota Tundra, for example, there's been actually a small amount of people that have complained about rod bearing failure. They're also talking about wastegate issues. Those are parts you don't get in an engine like this. Not to say that you can't build a reliable turbo engine. Ask Porsche, they've been doing it for years. And I trust that Toyota will do it. I really do have faith that Toyota will figure out a few of these nuances, and it won't be more than a year or two before they get past that. But the reality is that 3.4 liter twin turbo V6 has had some wastegate problems in some of the earlier generations. We also talk about rod bearing problems and some drivability issues there too. Now, it makes spectacular performance, great fuel economy, but there have been some challenges. Detonation, knocking situation too. Now, you got to remember, the problem is a lot of people aren't necessarily up to the task of driving a vehicle that has that type of drivetrain. People are normally used to a naturally aspirated 2.5 or a 3.5 where you can put in mid-grade fuel. Some people even get away with the low-grade fuel and they can drive it for years without any muss or fuss. But that's the problem with the turbo vehicle. Now that Toyota's doing, they're getting away from these tried and true naturally aspirated engines. They're going to turbo engines, and they actually need a higher grade, higher octane fuel to operate properly without trying to detonate. These engines are so simple, you can get sloppy with some of your maintenance, you can get sloppy with your fuel, and yet they will run forever. So a basic naturally aspirated 4-cylinder front-wheel drive means this is one of the latest, last, and best and most reliable Toyotas you can get still today. Now, we know the next generation of a Toyota Camry, they're talking about going pure electric. You're definitely in for a world that is changing, evolving, and we can all evolve. Toyota is great at evolving eventually. They take their time doing it. It's not like BMW, they got to overhaul their drivetrain every 3 years. No, Toyota keeps an engine and they keep it, they work out the bugs and they run with it for 10, 15 or more years because they know what they have, and that's why Toyota does it best, and that's why it's going to hurt once they make this engine disappear and they start transplanting these types of engines with turbocharged engines and more hybrid, as well as CVT transmissions. We know the continuously variable transmission is not a great drivetrain. It's not a great transmission when the likes of Nissan get a hold of it. Even Honda has had some big struggles. Toyota, they've got that first gear that takes up a lot of the torque, so they're a lot more reliable than some of their peers. But the fact remains is nothing beats a torque converter transmission as well as a naturally aspirated engine like this. They could only do one step better. Throw a manual gearbox in there yet, and they definitely have a workhorse that was built for life. So as you can tell, I truly believe that Toyota will have all these little bugs worked out. They're relatively minor, most of them. Sometimes they're glitchy with cameras or whatnot. But at the end of the day, Toyota will fix the problem. Unfortunately, Honda, on the other hand, right there, has made some drastic changes to some of their drivetrains and their hybrid and their 1.5 liter turbo 4s. You want to learn what's going on with Honda and where they went wrong and how they lost their reliability. You're definitely going to want to see that. Hope to see each and every one on the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.